Hello and welcome into IndyCar 2024 and New Track Record Podcast returns. Caleb Hatch, Justin Kinney. And in 2024 in IndyCar, no negative talk, Justin.
No negative talk.
Negative talk is out.
We are not doing anything negative on this podcast. We'll see how long this lasts.
We'll see how long we stick to that. But negative talk is out for 2024. What's in is us finally recording our first episode of New Track Record for 2024.
Good to be back.
Yeah, we're back. We're ready. We're refreshed. Ready to go.
Plenty to talk positivity.
Yes, let's dive into it. And not really a whole lot of huge news items from IndyCar Content Days, but we had an announcement earlier this week as we record on the evening of January the 11th here in the U.S., and Foyt has their lineup solidified for 2024. Stingray Robb was previously announced. Benjamin Pedersen congratulated him. Santino Ferrucci,
welcome to the team type thing,
also announced this week. Now, he was confirmed, and what was interesting that came out today during IndyCar Content Days is it's the same deal as last year. The hope is that it's full-time, depends on early results, basically through Indy, and getting the funding shored up. My guess would be that they will make this work. And with that Penske alliance, it's only going to help your operation. So Santino Ferrucci, all but full-time confirmed for 2024. Good news with Foyt getting some continuity back, and a guy who's clearly can be a number one driver for a team, especially, a smaller or midfield team. And so good to see him get that opportunity again based on how well he did just at Indy last year, how much of a threat he is at Indy each and every year. And now we're talking about a guy who's experienced and can bring a lot to the table.
Now, continuity is key with a team like AJ Foyt, which needs every advantage they possibly can. And I think you bring in a veteran guy like Santino Ferrucci, you bring him back rather, and he gives you some comfort in that we know what the expectations are. We know what the limitations are of Santino Ferrucci, but what he can do. 19th in points last year. I think year two can be better for the team and Ferrucci. And that's why I think it was important for them to at least bring him back, because I look at that Stingray Robb, quite frankly, as a non-factor, to be honest. Maybe he surprises this year and opens my eyes, but I just see him as a seat filler, to be honest. I feel bad for Benjamin Pedersen. Then again, he had an opportunity to prove something last year and really couldn't. Could we see Benjamin Pedersen back in that car if Ferrucci struggles after Indy, if the money's not there? Who knows? But a confusing situation was made clear with the announcement of Ferrucci.
And Larry Foyt said that the contract, the multi-year contract with Benjamin Pedersen that was announced, again, going into the 2023 season, lapsed. So Ferrucci gets the ride. Pedersen completely out. No number 55 Chevy running in 2024. And whether that means the check didn't clear, too much crash damage, or something.
There's a lot of crash damage.
I mean, it's could be a multitude of factors, but that is the reason why Pedersen is not back with the team for 2024.
But a multi-year deal, but he was only with the team for 1 year. So
but clearly they had terms in the contract that he did not meet.
And maybe, yes, I'm sure in the fine
funding
print,
could easily be one where you have to provide X amount of funding to continue. Right. You mentioned the crash damage, and if they're not able to make up for that cost, also comes back to funding, right?
Right.
So there are several factors at play, and obviously he crashed at the Indy 500, right? So, I mean, that's going to cost you a fortune to begin with. Yes, it was late in the race, but that's going to cost you a lot of money.
I mean, when your top finish is 15th over the course of a season and you're 27th overall in points.
Last among drivers who competed in every race last season.
It's tough to make a case that you deserve another year in the seat. And with Stingray Robb, like imagine what that line, if you had Stingray Robb and Benjamin Pedersen, ooh, man, if we're talking trying to grow this team with the alliance, the relationship they have now with Penske, those aren't the two guys that I want to go into a season with my first year with Penske under. And I think that's why it was the important thing to get Ferrucci back. I think he's a good guy to have in the paddock. Love him or hate him, even with drivers in the paddock. I think he's good to be happy to be around. It's good to be in the series. I like it. I like Ferrucci, and a good deal for Foyt. We'll see if he can grow after that 19th place finish last year.
And again, the Indy 500 was the highlight for Ferrucci in that Foyt program.
It was.
Getting a podium, the speed both cars had at Indy, but outside of Indy, it still was a struggle. His best finish was an 11th at Long Beach. He also had a 13th at Gateway, and that was it as far as top 15 finishes last season. He didn't have any top 5s or any top 10s. It was just that podium finish at Indy, which, of course, they don't have an actual podium there, but a third place is huge for a small team at Indy. That Penske partnership is made this ride a lot more attractive. Hopefully that's also made it so they can get more sponsors and that they can hire, better, more experienced crew. I mean, that's everything. And I think it will be very fascinating to see how they roll off the truck, not just the results for St. Pete as far as the race, but really just the first practice session. Like, are we seeing a noticeable improvement from what they do year over year at St. Pete, or is it kind of the same as usual?
Well, I think that's going to be huge. And we thought maybe after the podium last year that Foyt could use that to boost them in the second half of the season. It never really happened. But can they take the information they used last year and now add the resources, however much or little it is, with Penske and put that to work? So I think having a veteran driver in Ferrucci is of paramount importance to maximize that potential, and it's good to have him back.
Absolutely, and we'll see what they can do with it, but it feels promising when you have continuity, as you mentioned, for that number one seat, the 14 car, which is the car they really care about at Foyt, and to be able to bring him back on. And Ferrucci clarified at Content Days, he's not bringing funding. He's showing up. He said he's showing up with his hair and his race suit and his helmet, which I thought was great. The team's intention is to run him full time, but he's just showing up as himself, and that's promising because he's a driver that I think has done enough to earn a full-time ride on talent and merit alone.
Well, you know how you get more support, more money, more funding is put up some results, and we'll see if he can put up some results in the first half of the year. It can't be wait till Indy to really showcase what they can do. Hopefully they see it. And we're not talking podiums here. I think we're seeing a couple top 10s mixed in the first 5, 6, 7 races. I think that would be progress, and we'll see if it can happen.
We shall see, but at least it's promising to have some continuity, and I think you have to feel good about what's happening there. So that was the big driver news while we've been off all this time in terms of 2024. Other news to get to, updates on Texas and what could come there. We'll get to that a bit later on in the show. New teams that could enter. So we knew Pratt and Miller's interested, and they're still exploring all opportunities as far as Pratt Miller Engineering. They're working toward an IndyCar program, goal of launching in 2025. So they're not ready to confirm, according to Racer, that they're going to be on the grid, but they're working on that IndyCar program. So it's good to have another team interested. But then we got news as well that there's another team interested, and this one is fascinating because Prema, which is one of the top European teams outside of teams competing in F1 itself, they've won F2 championships with Charles Leclerc, Mick Schumacher, Oscar Piastri, European Le Mans Series LMP2 title in 2022. I mean, this is one of the top teams in Europe, and they're considering an expansion into the U.S. with an IndyCar program as well. They've had numerous IndyCar alums compete for the team. Marcus Armstrong, Felix Rosenqvist as well, along with, you go back, Ryan Briscoe, Stefano Coletti. Remember him? I
do.
Had one good result, and then a crash-filled season for KV.
Yep.
What was that, like 2012, 2013?
Oh, man, that far. I was going to say 2016, 2017, but
I think
you're right.
Back.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Callum Ilott, Charlie Kimball, Carlos Munoz, among some of the other IndyCar alums, but Felix Rosenqvist telling Racer that he said they're the best team in Europe outside of F1, so that's a pretty high bar. And what I find interesting, Racer reporting that former Arrow McLaren and Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing team executive Piers Phillips has been recruited by Prema to help out in this transition. Again, earliest they would compete would be 2025. So we have an interesting discussion. We have new teams interested.
Yes,
they
we
come
have
with a lot of credibility.
Pratt and Miller, Primo, Abel.
Yeah.
Is that Prema Motorsport just hanging out? See if they can
Abel looking to go full-time in 2025. RC Anderson essentially confirmed for the Indy 500. He was there at Content Days with his fire suit representing Abel. So that pretty much confirms it.
Yeah, he'll be in.
So he'll be competing for the Indy 500 this year once again with Abel. And so we have 3 named teams that want to join IndyCar. We already have 27 full-time entries. It's an interesting problem to have.
It is a problem to have. For the longest time, and Jay Fry has said this multiple times, one of his primary focuses was getting the car count up. They've gotten the car count up. Now I'm kind of looking at it, and it used to be news of another team looking to get in the series was hugely exciting. Now, my first thought is, where are they going to go? You can't show up at most races with 31, 32 cars, full timers, which if all of these deals work out, that's where you would be. With all of the issues presented in the series, car count is no longer one of them. Yes, granted, I would love to have these 2 teams in, but we don't necessarily need no more cars on the grid right now. Could this constitute negative talk? Because I have a stopwatch going.
Are you serious?
Yes, we're just over 11 minutes into no negative talk. I'm really dangerously close to the line. But I think when you look at it overall, it is great that the series is still accessible to so many teams or interested teams. That's a great thing. But the problem is you have OEMs supplying the series that are losing their asses on engine leases and technology and performance development and just basically investing in the series.
I mean, an engine lease these days goes for anywhere from 1.25 million to 1.5 million, essentially. That's kind of the reported range that we understand.
And my thing is, and I don't know, maybe somebody obvious out there can tell me why this wouldn't be. So let's say you have 27, 28 full-time cars, okay? You have a multiple amount of interested parties in the series. Why wouldn't the series go, you know what? For Honda and Chevy's sake, we're going to raise the cost of an engine lease to $2 million. And you'll probably price out some teams, or at least some teams that are like, well, we can't run 3 cars. We're going to only run 2, or we're not going to run 5 cars. Ganassi. We're going to run 3.
Well, here's the thing. Like, we worry about car counts in every offseason, like, oh, we're going to have 28 full-time cars, or there's a possibility, an outside shot of 30 full-time cars. We've had this growing the last several years, but it never pans out that way, for one. And the other thing is, as much as we talk about the addition, unfortunately, there's usually also subtraction when it comes to the grid. Teams downsizing a car or going away altogether. Rides and funding completely drying up. I mean, do we really think Ganassi is going to be running 5 cars again
as a one-year
in 2025? I don't think so.
Unless they finish 1 through 5 in the standings. But I think, and I've said it before on the podcast.
And McLaren wants a 4th car too. We forgot to mention that.
I've said it before on the podcast. If it came out tomorrow and said that all of a sudden the bottom 5 drivers for full-time rides in 2024 are gone and we're starting 22 cars, I don't think you lose anything in terms of the competition in the series, quite frankly. So if all of a sudden you go from 27, 28 to 30, 31, like what are we really adding to the series?
The other thing is Penske is very interested in trying to get a charter system going for teams. This is probably a lot more fuel for that fire to get this to happen. Obviously, it's not happening for 2024. I don't know if it's even happening for 2025.
No,
but
it sounds like
the team owners and stakeholders have to find a way to make that happen if they want that to happen.
Right.
Where they agree on something and lay it out. Because I don't think that's been a good deal for NASCAR. I mean, essentially, it's
been lucrative for the teams.
Yeah, lucrative
that went out.
For the teams that went out, but I don't think it's been lucrative in enticing new teams. I think that's one thing that IndyCar has going for itself is it's a low cost of entry because you have an old chassis, you have an old engine formula, You don't have a lot of updates. Yes, the hybrid is coming, but that will be an expense for teams when they come in that the current teams have already dealt with. So I guess it's added in the cost.
Yeah. Well,
so that makes it so that you can add more teams, which I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing. I'm very much in the playbook of 25 to 28 full-time cars is a sweet spot.
That's a perfect number. I don't think if you're hitting 30, I think that's too many, in my opinion. But I think also is the fact that IndyCar does not have a dedicated plan out there that say we're going to have a new chassis and this year is enticing more teams because they're like, well, hey, if we buy 3 tubs right now, it's going to be at least 3 years until we have to upgrade. If they came out tomorrow and said in 2026 there's going to be a new chassis, I guarantee you that a fair amount of those teams interested would say, well, we're going to wait till 2026.
Yes.
But the fact that there's no multi-year plan for IndyCar tells these teams that we can go out and buy tubs. And part of that is a good thing, right? But I think there's a fundamental issue with your series if it's become very affordable for teams to enter the series, relatively affordable, yet your OEMs are losing their ass. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Well, it's
me.
because it's not spread out among... I mean, if it was 3 or 4 OEMs,
correct,
this problem wouldn't exist.
That's why I think if all of a sudden they said, you know what, you guys have enough cars in this series, you have enough teams either in the series or interested in the series, cost of these engine leases are going to go up to $2 million. I guess I wouldn't have a problem with it. I know there's some teams out there that are going to cry foul and, oh, you're pricing us out. I get it. But my thing is there's more than enough teams that are interested in this series.
Also, how many times have these same teams cried foul for years and years and years, and they still show up?
They're still here.
So, and the other thing to keep in mind, and this also came out during Content Days here this week, but Mark Miles telling Speed Sport that leader circle payments to the top 22 full-time entrants in the series will increase substantially in 2024. Now, that amount was not revealed, and what does that mean?
Is it going back up to what it usually was?
Correct. Like, it was cut last year for increased marketing. So is it going back to what it was before, or does substantially mean, no, it's going up above and beyond that? I assume it's going up above and beyond
you never know
what it was prior to the cut last year. But either way, that's a good sign.
Yes, but let's say let's take a arbitrary $10 million pool of money. And last year we know that they took from the leader circle to invest in marketing. Are they just reallocating the same amount of money and putting more money this year into the leader circle, or are they actually investing more money in the series proper? Who knows if we can get an answer to that. But coming back really quick to the question about engine leases, if you raise the cost, is if tomorrow they came out and said it's a $2 million engine lease now, it's going up $500,000 or something, and AJ Foyt Racing came out and said, you know what, we can't afford that, we're done. I guess I wouldn't have much of a problem with it, because
I'd be surprised if that was right.
But I'm saying
point.
Hypothetically, if you make that move to, and Honda comes out and says, yeah, okay, cool, that makes us not lose as much money, and we're back in solid. I think that's a good decision. Whether you lose Foyt or any, like, just if you lost 2 teams after making that decision, and it shores up Honda's investment in the series, I think that's a good move.
And as always, it always comes back to the third OEM.
It does. I'm saying, if
we've joked about this for years, but like legitimately everything that's happening in IndyCar right now comes back to a third OEM. Everything. My
thing is, if you can put more money in the pockets of the OEMs of Honda and Chevy, and the field shrinks to 24, 25 cars, that's a win, in my opinion. I will sacrifice, and it's easy for me to say, I will sacrifice car count to make Honda and Chevy happy. I don't own a team. I'm not a diehard fan of one particular team. If this team or that team went away tomorrow because of this, it wouldn't hurt my feelings. I think the priorities need to be Honda and Chevy. I don't think they've been priorities. We've talked about that before. But if the series said, you know what, yeah, we're down, raise the cost of each engine lease $500,000 per lease, I'd be fine with it, because if 2 teams disappear right now, it sounds like there are teams ready to step up, buy their equipment, and invest in the series.
Absolutely. And we'll see what they do, because they're going to have to do something in terms of trying to keep Honda and Chevy both happy if they can't land that third OEM for 2026, which at this point, the timeline is next to impossible. I mean, essentially the Indy 500 would be the cutoff date to have that announced. And again, by the time something like that's announced, they're probably already working on stuff. It's just a matter of the public release of the information.
I'd still think it comes back to just going to the new CEO at Toyota and just, what do we got to do?
Yeah.
What do we got to do?
Begging.
You tell us. Yeah, begging, like on the floor, on your knees, begging. Please,
one note I forgot to get to about Abel Motorsports. They will be at the April Open test. I don't believe they were last year.
I don't think so, though.
So that is a big step forward for that program in 2024 as a one-off for the Indianapolis 500. So that's a look at some of the team news in terms of driver alignment and new teams interested. And then we also got this announcement. Not a surprise, but IndyCar and iRacing have agreed to a multi-year licensing agreement. They are now reunited. This is good news, but at the same time, should have never left.
Yeah, and it sounds like a more lucrative deal too. More I don't know if investment's the right word, but more commitment from, I think, IndyCar in terms of the licensing and all that stuff. I mean, I'm not into iRacing, but I know a fair amount of people are. And this is not like you said, this is like a big addition to the series because it should have never went away. But it's a step in the right direction because it was terrible that it went away in the first place. But it's kind of rectifying a wrong more than anything. And it's good to see. I know a fair amount of people are going to be excited out there, including many of our listeners that are big into iRacing. You and I aren't, but it's a good thing in terms of reaching different people based on their interests, and iRacing is a big interest for a lot of people. Is getting your sport out to them. Their racing is a huge deal. So,
well, and again, this is a platform for sim racing fans, and IndyCar wasn't on it. I mean, they were before, but then they dropped out. So now they're back. The iRacing Indianapolis 500, which is a very popular event, is coming back on. There will be IndyCar Series branding of the series on iRacing, multiple leagues to run IndyCar Series events on iRacing, license extension of Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
I mean, they say
the licensing agreement went into effect immediately.
Yeah, and they say they have like thousands of people that race like the 500 events, like the Indy 500. Like, that's nuts.
And the iRacing Indianapolis 500 details will be available later this month on that event.
So it's a big community, a big deal. It was a big deal when it went away, and it is righting a wrong in a lot of ways for IndyCar. So well done.
An event you could run in iRacing, but not in real life in IndyCar, at least
Texas?
in 2024. Yeah, Texas Motor Speedway. Interesting article on motorsport.com, Joey Barnes with the write-up. IndyCar could look beyond just TMS when it potentially returns to the Lone Star State in 2025. From the article and from Mark Miles.
So how do we take that? Because I think immediately your mind goes to COTA.
Yes.
But would there be a street race?
Well, that's where this article gets fascinating. So NTT Data, which is, of course, their parent company, NTT, is the title sponsor of the series. And then NTT Data has sponsored cars. They've sponsored the Texas race. Their HQ is in Plano, about 40 miles east of TMS. So that's an obvious fit. But then Circuit Americas had that one race in 2019. 2020 race was canceled. They did have spring training there in 2019 and 2020. They've not gone back. I'd be surprised. But Barnes goes into this. At the end of 2018, rumors of the series exploring the possibility of adding a street race in San Antonio. But then that was later muted when IndyCar added COTA, which is fascinating. And then another thing, high-ranking representative within the sport told motorsport.com, Barnes writes, of some talk being stirred up for a race focused on the streets around AT&T Stadium, which is, of course, the home of the Dallas Cowboys, which is in Arlington, about south of Texas Motor Speedway. But then that idea has quieted down.
This sounds a lot like Houston, doesn't it?
Yeah,
around the stadium. Never really took off, I guess.
And Miles dismissed that. He said, I haven't talked to Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, since I was chairman of our Super Bowl in 2012 in Indianapolis as part of the Super Bowl host committee and his role there. So I don't know if there's a whole lot there. But with Pato Award in the series, with a major sponsor in the series, just go back to TMS. Find a way to make it work. I understand why they couldn't make it work this year, but they made it sound like, oh, we'll be back. And of course, we know how those things work.
Right.
We take it with a grain of salt because there are no guarantees, especially when it comes to racing and scheduling events. So it was a shame that it was left off the schedule for this year. Now you just wonder, will it ever come back?
Well,
and with Eddie Gossage not a part of it anymore either, that makes it even tougher.
This could also be posturing from IndyCar as saying, okay, maybe there's some other interested parties that could approach us. I think if you came out and said in January of 2024 that we're returning to TMS in 2025, any interested folks that maybe would entertain a street race or even COTA would say, okay, well, that ship has sailed because they're going back to TMS. So maybe this is just IndyCar. They're like, well, maybe there's somebody out there that will reach out from San Antonio or Jerry Jones or something and see that. So I would hope we don't come around in 2025 and there's no racing in Texas. I would kind of almost be disappointed that there was no TMS because this series desperately needs oval races. I don't think a street race in San Antonio or Arlington really does it for me. My brilliant idea with the border crossing Grand Prix, which would be the El Paso Ciudad Juarez street course, half in U.S., half in Mexico, because that fulfills your Mexico race. Just putting it out there. But no, seriously, I still expect them to be back in 2025 at TMS. I just think maybe this is keeping the door open for any interested parties that are kicking around, maybe putting together some sort of street race in Texas.
So that's the latest in terms of Texas Motor Speedway and its future on the schedule. And one other headline item I want to get to, and it was shocking when it happened, and it's still hard to believe, but Gil de Ferran, 2003 Indy 500 winner, multi-time kart champion, really one of the great drivers that unfortunately started right before the split happened and then was, caught up in the kart and IRL war. At least he was able to compete at Indy a couple of times and get an Indy 500 win because he was an all-time talent. But he passed away of a heart attack over the holidays. And again, sending our thoughts to his family. Just shocking news to happen.
Well, and how it happened too, in terms of, it sounds like he was racing with his son and TK and his son, and had a heart attack while they were racing or after or whatever,
karting,
and passed away. And it was just brutal. And even TK coming up or saying a couple days after that, basically a reminder to go, to the doctor regularly, because he said, Jill he didn't do that. And no matter how good a shape you are in or how good a shape you think you are in, regular doctor visits when you get to that age, mid-50s, is important. And it's just tough, man. Gil de Ferran was one of the good dudes, not just as a driver, but in the paddock going forward and working with Penske and working with McLaren as well. Was pretty cool, and tough to see him pass away at the Concourse Club.
Yes, so like a private motorsport club in Florida. So just stunning news, just 56 years old. Again, 2000, 2001 kart champion, 2003 Indy 500 winner as well. And also, let's not forget, driver of the fastest closed course lap.
Yeah.
At over 241 miles per hour at California Speedway. Rest in peace to that as well.
Yeah, and you don't know. I mean, you look at Gil de Ferran, and soon after he retired in the early 2010s, he jumped into team ownership.
Had a lot of success in sports cars after leaving IndyCar at the top. I mean, he was just 35 when he left in 2003 and took runner-up in the championship, and then went to have a ton of success in the American Le Mans Series with his team, and Simon Pagenaud, raced with him. They had a lot of success there in that series, and then he went in F1 as a sporting director for Bar Honda. Worked with Lusco Dragon Racing, which was Jay Penske's.
They combined, right? Team. It was de Ferran Dragon, and
then they were gonna run a car. They combined, and then the team rebranded. De Ferran was gonna actually run a car for TK, right? And then that fell through, unfortunately. But just really hard to believe. And for me, it's weird because the first Indy 500 I attended was 2003.
Really?
So it's just kind of weird to think about that here we are just over 20 years later and he's no longer with us.
And very instrumental, too, in the development of the current chassis, the DW12. Named after Dan Weldon, but Gil de Ferran was very involved in the Iconic Committee is what they called it, with the development of the DW12 and the new tub and chassis. So just a tough loss. I think he was a guy that was a value to the series on the track, off the track, in the paddock, whether he was in his 30s, 40s, 50s, I mean, still around, and could have eventually, I think, maybe become a team president of some sort for a team or developed a team again, tried. So just tough to see, and definitely will be missed. And
there's a really good article by Nathan Brown of the IndyStar.com, talking about TK kind of reflecting on his friend Gil de Ferran. And, Gil had told him back during the Vegas Grand Prix kickoff and everything, de Ferran told him, I don't feel good. And it's, you kind of wonder after that. And Brown goes into details how he got a text from his buddy Rubens Barrichello, longtime F1 driver and teammate in IndyCar for a bit as well. Is everything okay with Gil? And then, he's on a flight and he can't really, you can't make calls and can't do a lot of things. And then he's texting Elio and Elio said call him, and he knew that it was bad then, but so it's just, man, it's just brutal. And for someone like Kanaan to race as long as he did, and Greg Moore and Dan Weldon and now Gil, it's just especially it's hard being to believe. There and being a part of everything going down. So it's really tough, but I mean, it's a lesson to everybody. Is Gil de Ferran, by all indications, was a fit dude for 55, 56 years old. But it's a silent killer, man. If you don't feel good, go to the doctor. Absolutely. And I know. Do you have like I mean, for me, it's obvious. It's the 2003 Indy 500. But do you have a Gil de Ferran memory or something that stands out to you? No, I think the first thing that comes to mind still after all these years with Gil and Elio was them at Penske. And it was like a super team. I mean, yeah, it very much was. I mean, when I think of the top tandems that I've experienced in IndyCar since I started really following it, it started with Elio and Gil. I mean, that was the super team, and Marlboro and blazoned all over the place, and then of course that eventually just became Penske Racing, but the red and white. And those guys in red racing suits and all that. I mean, that's immediately what I come to mind after all these years when I think of both of them, Gil de Ferran and Elio Castroneves. I mean, there was a time where I just assumed that both of those guys won every race in IndyCar just because of how dominant they were. It was very much, in my mind, the current Red Bull Racing of IndyCar was those two. And it was a great time. And unfortunately, now we're going to have to go on without Gil. And, I think of... his first year in car, I mean, he had that iconic Pennzoil car, right? That he started out with, and was at Hall VDS Racing, went to Walker, and then Penske, just for a handful of years, but had so much success in just such a short career with Penske. Yeah, he only made 31 starts in the IndyCar series, the IRL. Mm-hmm. Before that, of course, it was PPG and kart and all that stuff. Yes, but, only 31. But even then. 5 wins in the IRL, had 7 wins in IndyCar / kart, and back-to-back championships, 2000, 2001. Just a world champion 03 with kart, so won the 500, of course, that year as well. So just a well-established guy that was a big part of IndyCar even now, and just terrible news. Absolutely. All right, well, that... wraps up the news portion as far as the headlines for this week. If you agree or disagree with us on anything, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free to sign up for and follow us. You'll get weekly emails of our new episodes and any other special announcements. Also, while you're there, check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers for sale as well. You can also reach us on social media, IndyCar Podcast on Instagram, on Twitter /X, on Facebook, just search for New Track Record. And you can also email us newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. You can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their monthly support. And as always, follow us on your favorite podcasting platform, free to download, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, all for free. Mailbag time, and not really a ton to get to, despite the long layoff that we have had.
And content days.
We have a lot to get to from content days.
Okay,
a lot of little things.
When did it go from
things.
media days to content days? Just a couple of years ago?
Yeah, a few years ago. I mean, social media, right? And they're just trying to change it up, but there's really not like a lot in terms of
not much
stuff
content from content days. I guess like concrete things.
Yes.
We'll get
and not a lot in our mailbag either. So you posted this about, what does Penske have over other top team owners to keep them quiet, which we're all kind of wondering the same thing. And Marshall Pruitt even said as much in the Racer.com mailbag one of the weeks, where it's like they'll say all this stuff, behind backs privately, but then when it comes to public statements, it's all hunky-dory, everything is awesome. DC Soda said, you mean the people that literally own IndyCar and IMS? I'm not seeing the confusion here. Well, it's just more of like,
what are they going to do? That's my question. Like, what are they afraid of? Like, IndyCar is full of instances where team ownership challenged what the series was doing, and not I'm not talking about drastic steps. I'm just saying, like, being able to speak out and speak your mind about potential issues they see in the series. Like, what does Roger Penske and the Penske Corp have on some powerful ass dudes when you talk about Chip Ganassi and Zach Brown and Michael Andretti
and Bobby Rahal?
Like, what do they have to keep those guys towing the company line? Like, basically corporate shills is what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the threat here? They're not going to kick them out. They're not going to. What are they going to do? They're going to fine them millions of dollars for speaking out. They're not going to do that either.
Yeah, that's terrible press.
Yeah, I'm just like, so what is it? I don't understand. Like, when Holman and Company was running everything, when it was Randy Bernard, when it was whoever, Tony George, like, there was plenty of people speaking out. Team owners, like, they're notorious for seeming. I mean, even as recently as when we started this podcast, it was always the running joke was, team owners were always pissed off about something. They would let you know what they were pissed off about, even though if everything was hunky-dory on the outside. Now it's this projection of everything is hunky-dory on the inside, but it's not. And the team owners just are refusing to speak out. And I just wonder, like, why the muzzle on these guys?
Because no negative talk in 2024.
I don't know what the threat is. And Chip Ganassi is like a dude that does not take kindly to threats whatsoever. I mean, that dude is. Well,
considering how he took shots at Zach Brown,
right?
With everything that went down.
Those guys aren't known as dudes that are just going to toe the company line and be shills, and it just seems like that's what they are. And I don't know. Even Marshall Pruitt says that that's happening, but nobody can tell me why.
Penske must have so much dirt on everyone else.
I just don't get it. Does he have text? Does he have sex? I don't know. Like seriously, like, what do you have against these dudes that is making them fall in line and be corporate shills?
Jeff Cerneski said, after two splits, I think the current team owners understand that splitting and forming a new series is not the answer. No, I'm not saying
they split.
Yeah, no.
I'm just saying they can't even speak out against issues. And I'm not talking like huge issues, but if they came out and said, well, the of course you can never talk about the leader circle. But what if they came out and said leader circle is, I think in a perfect world, IndyCar would be supporting the top 25 finishers, or we need more money in that to keep current teams and entries around. Like, that's not attacking the series, but it's just like they can't even make suggestions publicly.
This shared with us from Beans B Card blog, saying thought you might like this, and it's from NASCARman_RR on Twitter, saying, I thought this was an interesting question for what races are good examples of the best of IndyCar, so I totaled up the responses. 120 answers listing a specific race. 83% were ovals, 49% Indy 500s, excluding Indy. 74% were tracks IndyCar doesn't race at. With 12 responses, 2015 Fontana was the top race. That's no surprise.
Yeah.
That's what I would have guessed.
Yeah. I mean, just interesting result. I mean, once again, people love ovals, but don't go to them.
Yeah. That's true.
Did we talk, speaking of ovals, did we talk about last podcast about the musical acts coming to Iowa?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Making sure.
That was so last year.
Well, totally. Literally. I can't remember what the hell I did last week. It's been 3 weeks since we had a podcast.
You posted your border crossing Grand Prix, El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, street course, half in U.S., half in Mexico. And Poet Shevchenko said, pit crews will be 4 tiremen, 1 jackman, 1 backup jackman, and 1 customs agent.
Yes, very much. That was a witty text. I was hoping Jenna Fryer would pick up on that and maybe really start a movement, but didn't go anywhere. But then Border Crossing Grand Prix, if you want to come up with unique events for IndyCar that'll get people watching.
Couple of replies on Santucci back at Foyt for 2024. Mom 2X over 2002. Best news I've seen all this offseason. So excited for this. Jeremy from HBG says Dale Coyne's phone is surely ringing from wherever Pedersen lives.
Good stuff.
Yeah, Coyne still TBA. My guess would be Devlin DeFrancesco and some driver that is nowhere near on the radar.
You think?
That's my guess.
Yeah, very well could be. That's usually how they roll.
Yeah. And you posted, why is IndyCar Content Days so early? January 10th and 11th. A couple days being in the limelight, then you disappear for another 2 months. Wouldn't having it in mid-late February make more sense? Archie O'Reilly _ said, wondering exactly the same thing. And he was covering IndyCar Content Days. So I believe so for Project Dive Bomb. But yeah, it is fascinating. And it just is curious why that was the move that was made.
Is it an event that they typically have done? Like, I understand NBC wanting to get everybody in one place early on. They can work on the spots and profiles and pictures and videos and bumpers and all that stuff. I get that. Do they just look at it and say, okay, we're just going to do that and invite the media and do it all at once?
It's essentially a social media event for 2 days.
I'm just kind of thinking like this is, so you're in the limelight for a couple days and then you're gone for the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you're gone until the open test, which I don't even think that's been confirmed, right?
Not yet. Not that
I can recall. Now, the expectation is it's once again at
Thermal.
But I don't think it's been confirmed.
Late February, something like that. I mean, you just kick off the season on what, 14th of March?
Mm-hmm. Around there.
Just wondering why we're doing this in early January.
A couple replies. So I posted, because you got to remember, it's Andretti Global now.
Yes.
So Andretti Global Race Team, AGR. Poet Shevchenko said that's a fresh new name. A word synonymous with fresh and new is green.
Like Team Green.
Yes. And Marty Williams 63 said, that's cool with a K, which was, that's a great response. Very good.
Well
stuff.
done. The couple people picked up on that.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So that wraps up the mailbag and abbreviated edition. We get to news and notes, and a lot of news and notes from IndyCar Content Days that we'll get to, and this couple other driver things as well. And let's start off, though, going back a couple of driver announcements and Indy Lights. Again, we're still going to keep calling it Indy Lights.
Yeah, it's always going to be Indy Lights here.
Niels Coulin is set with HMD. So, again, 10 drivers for their lineup.
That's more than last year. Didn't they have 9 last year?
I think so. I think one of them, though, is part-time.
Okay.
But Niels Coulin is set with HMD, 22-year-old Dutch driver. He'll drive the number 33, 8th confirmed driver for the team. But I believe they're going to have 10. Also, Lindsey Brewer going from USF Pro 2000 to Indy Lights with Juncos Hollinger Racing. We knew that was probably on the cards because she tested a couple months ago as well. So got a big social media following. Her advisor is Peter Rossi, Alexander's father.
Oh, really?
Found that interesting as well. So
she has a sizable following on social media, not necessarily for her racing acumen.
And we'll leave it at that.
Say that. So if you know, you know. If you don't know, look her up.
And then we have a couple of driver announcements for the Rolex 24. Kiffin Simpson will be there with Dragon Speed. Alex Palou will be there. Not that this is a surprise, but he will be there with Ganassi and the Cadillac team, right? That's what they are right now.
Yeah, I think so.
So more and more drivers. It's hard to believe, but we're like, 2 weeks away, essentially, from that event? Is that right? 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
I think we're 3 weeks away, right? It's January 11th right now as we speak, so I think it's January...
It is January 27th. Okay, yeah, so we're like 3 weeks away.
27th? Well, I mean, 2 weeks from Saturday.
Yeah.
right?
28th. Let's see. Yeah, no, that is 2 weeks away. It's hard to believe.
Man. Well, the good thing is we can get through January reasonably quick. Then we're only facing February.
Yeah, I mean, once you get to the Rolex 24, you feel like you're getting close, and then Daytona even closer.
Yes.
And then hopefully the thermal test, and then St. Pete, and you're there. Several other notes from Content Days. So Bus Bros no more.
Aw.
But Scott McLaughlin said, yes, there will certainly be another chapter.
A rebranding of sorts?
Perhaps. Maybe release Scott McLaughlin solo. Because Joseph Newgarden and Brian Simpson split the Dream Digital and Creative, so that's why Bus Bros is going away. Also, Kiffin Simpson will have the number 4 for Ganassi, joining a list of all-time greats at Ganassi, and including none other than Alexander, or not Alexander. Zanardi. Alex Zanardi,
yes.
But he doesn't go by Alexander, so I was getting confused.
You can call him Alex. Maybe his parents call him Alexander.
Perhaps.
When he's in trouble. Alexander.
Bruno Junqueira also among some of those drivers. There are a few other big names. Brian Herta, I think, had number 4 as well when he was with Ganassi, so pretty big. Also, from one Ganassi driver to another, the number 11 Ganassi car, Marcus Armstrong, Angela Ashmore, only the 3rd lead female engineer in IndyCar history. She will lead that car, so that's good news there.
Cool.
Marcus Erickson, who has a new sponsor, Delaware Life, which is under the Gamebridge umbrella. Midnight Blue fire suit, so it should be a cool-looking car. They sponsored Grosjean in a couple of races, I think, last season.
I do believe so.
But Olivier Boisson will continue with that entry and will be Marcus Erickson's engineer. So it's a big get there.
Most fun name to say for me in IndyCar.
Oh, yes.
Olivier Boisson.
Fully agree. Olivier Boisson. Also, you can pretty much guarantee 100 Days to Indy is going to continue because Nathan Brown tweeted that Adam Marinelli, who's the showrunner and co-executive producer for last year's edition of 100 Days to Indy, was walking the halls during IndyCar Content Days. I think that's a good sign.
I would say so.
Oh, and I mentioned Alex Palou will be at the Rolex 24. So this team is absurd. Scott Dixon, Alex Palou, Ringer van der Zand, and Sebastian Bourdais.
A murderer's row of dudes. And it's going to take a little bit to get used to Alex Palou. In
DHL color, right? It is so weird.
It is absolutely
so weird to look at. Let alone it's still weird for me to get used to Ganassi and sports cars driving Cadillac instead of who were they with, like Ford for a while?
I think it was Ford, yeah.
Yeah. That's still hard for me to get used to.
Palou and the yellow DHL is just
bizarre.
It's going to take some getting used to, for sure.
Elsewhere, 5 Hour Energy announces a full season associate sponsor for Pietro Fittipaldi in the number 30 entry.
It's a big land
for Rahal. Yeah. First time they've been back in motorsports since 2018. That was in NASCAR, according to Adam Stern of Sports Business Journal. So a pretty big get for the Rahal team. You have...
We should probably get Stern on here pretty soon.
Yeah. You feel like there's going to be some good news stuff. In fact, he also had this. IMS up by roughly 10,000 tickets for the 108th Indy 500 versus comparable sales period last year. This was late December, so that would put it at over 225,000 people in attendance if the event were held, a couple weeks ago when this came out. So again, making progress. Wouldn't shock me at all if this is a sellout.
No, I agree, especially how close they came last year, and you're 10,000 ahead of what you were last year. So I think maybe we'll have Adam Stern on at least before the season starts to talk about some off-season stuff, some finance junk, especially if we get some more details on Leader Circle. And then, of course, the looming TV deal. You would have to think by March, you're going to at least know who the players are going to be. We think what we've heard is NBC, CW, and Fox are the 3 primary, but what are there numbers being thrown around or rumored at the very least? So we'll get Stern on to talk about a lot of those things.
And another note on driver Jair Hildebrand wants to return to the Indy 500 after missing out last year, working on a 500 return. What is interesting, the Foyt team, who he's been with in the past, they're apparently locked in at 2 cars.
Which is a good move. They don't need any more than 2.
So do not look for a third Foyt entry, which, of course, we say that, and then it seems like they come up with a third Foyt entry time and time again, but that was the understanding when they announced Ferrucci, that there will not be a third Foyt entry, and not a full-time entry, and not even an Indy 500 only entry either.
Well, when you look at his, was it Polar Ecosystems? What was his sponsor? Is that a...
Oh, Preferred Freezer?
There you go, Preferred Freezer.
That was a Carpenter sponsor.
Okay, so I didn't know if that was a personal sponsor for Hildebrand or if it was a Foyt or a Carpenter. I didn't know if he was going to be bringing money, potentially. But it would be nice to see Hildebrand back. But who with? It won't be Foyt.
No, it will not. And we'll see if he's able to land a ride. Best of luck in his search. Gateway's offering this deal that I think is pretty cool. Family 4-pack for the August 17th night race. Again, the fact that that's a night race again, just fixing a problem that shouldn't have
been a problem. Like iRacing.
4 tickets, 4 hot dogs and sodas, 2 programs for $130. So there you go.
Pretty good.
Bring the family.
Sure.
Family 4-pack. Good deal by them. And the Carlin name is going away in motorsport. They've been rebranded as Rodin Motorsport ahead of the upcoming season after the departure of founder Trevor Carlin last year.
I mean, maybe I just have to do some more research on this. Like, Trevor Carlin was a freaking lifer in racing.
Yeah.
Like, did he just reach the age where that was going to be his retirement, is selling the team? I don't know. I didn't even know that happened.
So Rodin Cars, which is a New Zealand-based track car manufacturer, invested in 2023. This is according to Racer. Purchased the stake owned by Graham Chilton, which was, again, he's the father of former F1 and IndyCar driver Max Chilton. And then the team was named Rodin Carlin, and then Rodin assumed full control at the turn. So basically they bought him out.
Right.
It's the way I see it.
That's why I kind of look at Prema with talking about an IndyCar team, and I'm like, sounds pretty similar to what Carlin was. And we saw is disaster the right word for Carlin's entry into IndyCar?
Yeah, they bit off more than they could chew too quickly.
And I kind of look at Prema like, could that be similar? You hope not if they do get into the series, but I see a lot of similarities between Carlin and Prema in the sense they've had exceptional amount of success in the European ladder, but weren't ready for IndyCar. And that was, I think, Carlin even dabbled in Indy Lights first. Didn't they? A season?
Yeah. Chilton ran in Lights for a season, won a couple races, I think.
Yeah, I mean... And
then moved up to IndyCar with Kimball, and they had 2 full... I mean... The problem necessarily wasn't the driver lineup. I know that's what people want to point to, because remember, Chilton ran with Ganassi in IndyCar as well. So they were in Indy Lights for several years, but the crew just had no live pit stop experience. It was an inexperienced crew in terms of IndyCar, and that's what really did them in.
Yeah, I just look at it. I think when I'm looking at the best... And this is the problem, is you never know when sponsors are going to be on board. I really think the incremental step should be Lights, Indy only, and then you venture in. Yes. Not even from Indy only to full time, but maybe you do. Yeah,
like the Meyer-Shank method where 5, 10 full season.
Yeah, or you don't. If you don't want to do Lights, then you go Indy only, half a season, full season. I think jumping into IndyCar right now, feet first, from nothing to a full-time team, is not a good idea.
Yes.
That's why I look at Abel Motorsports and say, okay, they're doing that progression thing. You mentioned Shank and what Michael Shank was able to do. Juncos kind of to a certain extent too. I think that's the proper way to go about it. But coming to the IndyCar pool and jumping right into the deep end of the full-time seat and schedule, especially if you have multiple cars, man, that's a lot, because you are very much trying to catch up.
And Pato Ward had a great answer. So he was not one of the 5 veteran drivers that was speaking highly about developments they learned about at a dinner with Penske Entertainment leadership on Tuesday night. Ward was not there. Alexander Rossi was, Marcus Ericsson, Scott Dixon, Joseph Newgarden.
To be a fly on that wall.
Did I say Graham Rahal?
No.
Those were the 5. So they picked, a driver from, those teams. I'm surprised they picked Rossi instead of Pato, but maybe because they know Pato's going to speak his mind and not. But maybe. Pato essentially said, when you're speaking of growth, change will usually rattle people's floor, but when you don't evolve and when you don't change, you will not grow.
Maybe that's why he didn't get that invite.
And Mario Andretti said, fully agree with Pato.
Sounds like the Well, and we've said it before, and Marshall Pruitt put it more eloquently than we ever can. But in the most recent mailbag, it's basically, he looked at it when Robin Miller had the mailbag, and now Marshall Pruitt, for most of the time the mailbag's been around, it's been looked upon as a sounding off board that IndyCar execs have looked at and respected and say this is the pulse of the fan base. And the current ownership kind of looks at it as, well, we've done this, and this with our business investments over the years, and look at us with all this money and all this capital. We know what we're doing. It doesn't matter what the fans think. That's kind of what this regime running IndyCar is and treats the fans, and it's unfortunate. But it sounds like, once again, they want to hear a bunch of yes men from the paddock as well.
And Pato Award gives us our tweet of the week, I guess really the last several weeks, but this came out this week. This from Jenna Fryer. Pato Award says he shifted from IndyCar season to an intense F1 program and needed a solid 10 to 14 days off at end of year to recharge. That included, quote, no chasing tail, end quote.
That is a phenomenal quote from Pato Award. It's going to be tough to beat this season. That's what I want to see from Content Days, as an IndyCar driver going, you know what, basically, I wasn't trying to hook up for a good 2 weeks. What dedication from Pato Award. And I said, that's pretty much what we were doing with our hiatus.
Yeah.
We left our wives alone for a couple weeks. We weren't chasing tail for a couple weeks. But just a great quote from Pato Award.
Absolutely awesome. New sponsors for Ed Carpenter Racing as well. It didn't get to that. I mean, it's related to Todd Alt and everything with BitNile, but it's just not branded as BitNile all over the car.
Now
they have Guy Care, Risk On International, but they're all under Todd Alt companies.
Now, something too we wanted to hit on that you let me know today: SRX, no SRX for 2024.
So IROC coming back, but SRX.
Do you think that's
going away?
That's directly associated with SRX going away?
I just feel like SRX got away from their mission when they switched from CBS to ESPN. I mean, TV ratings tanked.
Because they moved them to Thursday. Because all these people are like, "Oh, bring back Thursday Night Thunder," and then nobody watches.
No one watched.
So it doesn't work. Thursday Night Thunder doesn't work.
It did not work, and again, it's a shame because it was a fun series, especially when they had the local track Ringer. Yeah. And then they kind of got away from that, and it was just NASCAR guys who could fill in and IndyCar guys who could fill in.
Yeah,
you got away from what made it so cool, is having the local Ringer be a part of those fields, and
the novelty had worn off for sure for SRX.
It was a great idea. It had its time. Unfortunately, I'd be surprised if it comes back.
I think that maybe shows just how hard it is to break into the auto racing market in terms of new leagues and all that stuff, and new series is. It was a great idea to start. It sounded like all the things that you wish racing used to be in terms of stock cars and all that stuff. I mean, my dad actually sent me, excuse me, I get choked up when I'm talking about the old stuff. He sent me a picture. This is 1962 Fireball Roberts. Okay, practice at Daytona in 1962. This is a picture of him. And the caption says, take notice of the key to start the car, actual key, because these are stock cars, shoulder and leg support padding. So instead of, actually being cocooned in it, it was just basically looked like dental chair padding that's kind of keeping you in the car. I'm showing it to you right now, okay? The taped stock wheel, okay, so it's the same steering wheel. They just taped it up. The stick shift on the column, okay, just like old school, on the column. And the best part is, well, no fire suit, of course, but the penny loafer shoes that Fireball Roberts has on. The penny loafer shoes at practice at Daytona in 1962. I feel like that's kind of what SRX was trying to tap back into, the good old days, and everybody just showed up and all the cars were similar, and in SRX.
Run what you brung.
Right? And it just kind of went away from that. And I think it was cool for a while, but then everybody's still kind of like, I can just go see the same stuff on my dirt track if you're interested. And there's not enough casual interest to tune in. So it had its run. What was it? 2 years or 3 years?
3. Yeah.
So it didn't even make it 3 years. Before.
No, it made it 3.
Okay,
this would have been the 4th.
Okay. So it made it 3 years and then done. I think it was cool for the time. Novelty had worn off. And it tried a big move. Quite frankly, CBS didn't want it anymore because you're not making that move from Saturday nights on CBS to Thursday nights on ESPN unless the money is dried up for CBS. And it was gone. And now it's gone for good.
And time now for a random split air driver of the week.
So we went into the 1996-97 IRL season, and we're going with a guy that some people have heard of, with Billy Rowe.
Definitely heard of him.
Billy Rowe, he raced in the 97, 98, and 2000 to 2002 seasons. 16 career starts. He started a pair of Indianapolis 500s. He tried to qualify for 3, only made 2. The one he did not qualify for was his last one, 2002, I believe. Started the 500 in 1997, driving a Dallara Oldsmobile, started 24th, finished 22nd. 1998, he was the final starter on the grid at 33rd, finished 30th. In 2002, in a G-Force Chevrolet, failed to qualify. It's a veritable who's who of IRL teams that he raced for. You have Tempero Geoffrey Racing, you have Euro International, Rowe Racing.
Yeah, his own team.
Which was just a second Vegas race in 97 that he competed at. DB Man Motorsports. I have no idea what that is.
Team Scandia. Heard of that one.
Blueprint Racing. Logan Racing. And then Zali
Racing, yeah.
The only one that I've heard of, there's 2. Logan Racing and Tempero Geoffrey Racing.
I've heard of Scandia. Scandia.
But Euro International, DB Man Motorsports, Rowe Racing, of course. I have no idea what those are. But actually made a fair amount of starts. 16 starts in the IRL. His first race, he tried to qualify for Phoenix in 96, did not qualify. People had to qualify to run races in 1996. Is that coming back in IndyCar at some point? His first start in IndyCar was 1996-97 season at Phoenix, and then finished at 22nd at Indy. Did not qualify at Texas in 96. His best finish in the IRL looks like it was Texas and Vegas, 13th. Vegas in 97 and Texas in 2000. Texas won in 2000.
Also, one final note on him. He has the Indianapolis Motor Speedway's first official electric car lap record of 106.897 miles per hour on May 7th, 2011. His first lap, first time around in the Bronner Hawk EX11. That from the Wikipedia page.
He did some Toyota Atlantics and then Infiniti Pro Series as well, but a resident or native, at least, of Indianapolis. Retired in 2004. He's now 66 years old. Mr. Billy Rowe, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
All right, that wraps up our first episode for 2024. Hopefully, we limited our negative talk this week.
I think we're off to a good start.
We tried our best.
We did our best. We tried to stay as positive as possible for as long as possible.
We'll be back next week. Hopefully some driver announcements. Rumor has it Dale Coyne Racing could have some driver announcements on the way in the coming days. So we'll look for that hopefully next week here on New Track Record Podcast.
Podcasts by Federated Media.